Gentlemen, are you all set to go?
Did I pass?
You're on.
Well, 2 out of 3.
Okay. Good morning, y'all.
Good morning.
I would like to call the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, November 13th to order. To open up, we recently celebrated Veterans Day. The Board of Selectmen want to say thank you to all our veterans and their families. And with that, Bill, would you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first order of business is to open the sealed bids for the Melvin Village Fire Department storage structure. We have one bid. Drum roll.
I guess they win.
Yep.
Accessorize.
Yeah.
Good thing because we get to take it down.
It almost just killed me.
John McNamara has bid $126.26.
So,
Is that acceptable, Chief? Is there a motion?
just seeing it get taken down would be.
I move we accept the bid from John McNamara for purchase of the portable storage structure at the Melvin Village Fire Station. The amount of $126.26.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Any discussion, Chief? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion pass. Aye. Motion passes 3-0.
Will Karen notify John?
Sure.
It's all cleaned out, so it's ready to be taken down.
Next item is public input.
Come on.
No takers?
Okay. I sent you an email. Did you read it in regards to the Cordelli, the law they're trying to pass?
This was
Which, it's HB what?
1452.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one, sure.
Okay,
We'll go.
basically, and you have a copy of it, right? This was the one that was to modify how towns are assessed for schools, correct?
Yes. What it does is it specifies that the only way cooperative school district can allocate their costs is totally based upon the assessed valuation of the communities involved, not according to any other formula that was pre-existing.
I made a couple of inquiries Thursday when I was in Concord, and this was a refile of the bill last year. And I talked to a couple of lobbyists and a couple, actually legislators, and it's probably going to be inexpedient to legislate. So,
What other methods are there for assessing?
Well, the current, I can't speak to anybody with our district, but the way the Governor Wentworth district allocates their costs is 3/4 based upon the school population and 1/4 based upon assessed valuation. Okay, so, I don't know for sure, but I presume that that's always been the way that it's been, the formula that's always been used by the district.
this guy knows.
Since the district was founded, it was 75-25.
Right.
But you also have to factor in that within that 75%, also homeschool students are counted in that number, because even though they might not attend classes, they also will use facilities of the school and participate in schools. This was a refile from last year. I always like to think of this this is sort of like a 7-year locust. It comes up about every 7 years. Generally, when a particular town will see a spike, and according to Granite State News last week, Brookfield's spike this year was because of 1/3 enrollment in their student population. They went from 60 to 80. That's really going to, in a smaller town, that's really going to alter your funding. But it had been discussed at length. We had, years ago in the school board, we said, well, we should go to 50-50, but 75-25 is the most equitable, I would like to say, even though when you take the funds that are contributed by Wolfboro and Tuftonboro, it is well over half of the cost of the school district being funded. And I wish that the proponents of the changing of the funding formula would spend as much time and energy as trying to change the fourth prong of the tax assessment, which is the state funding. We're going, $2.50 plus going to the state based on the Claremont decision of almost 20 years ago. That might be nice to be addressed.
Yes. Thank God. Well, I can remember the Augenblick formula, and of course the state just didn't fund that. It has a habit of traditionally, in the past decades, funding 90 cents on the dollar or 92 cents on the dollar. And the Claremont decision basically was a slam dunk. The state legislature just did not fund things, and it went to court, and the judge didn't really have to think a lot. But, the Augenblick formula had four variations.
So, Mike, back to
Does
my
that answer
question.
your question?
Yes, somewhat. Where do you see it going, though? I mean, is this because I already have some people, in fact, I ran into people on Saturday saying, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with this? And
Of the 5 people I spoke to, all 5 represented to me, and they spoke to them independently, indicated that something to the effect that it was inexpedient to legislate.
Okay.
And that this was just a almost verbal rehash of
No, I don't understand the fear. We're already paying a substantial portion of the school budget. Is it that because our assessed value is high?
Yeah.
yes.
We pay more?
If it went to 100% based on assessed valuation, I saw one analysis that showed that Tuftonboro's contribution would increase by almost 90%. So we'd pay almost twice as much as we're paying now.
Another $3+ million under that formula.
And that's what some of the people that talked to me, some of the ladies on Saturday were.
And Wolfboro's in the same boat.
Right.
Their increase is not nearly as dramatic, but it's still a 40+% increase.
Right.
If you Google Molten Borough Speaks, okay, the gentleman from Molten Borough did put up a chart that shows the existing funding formula and what would happen under this new funding formula. And it's scary reading.
So what's the purpose of Cordelia sponsoring this?
Well,
I mean, it doesn't seem like the usual right-wing conservative policies.
I have from a third party he was contacted on this and said, "Oh, I didn't mean to sign that.
Oh.
I didn't know that as a third party, I can't speak. I haven't spoken to Glenn personally, so."
Yeah, I can't remember. Was she 14? I don't remember.
Thank you for speaking to it.
Okay.
I think he's trying to distance himself from that.
There also is legislation under consideration for vouchers or scholarships.
Right.
And if you homeschool, you could get, I think it's at least $2,500 per child. But you have no accountability, and you are not required to be certified in any way. So the school system operates with what becomes expensive, the education of the teachers, what the facility has to do, all that sort of thing. And this would be, you can say you're homeschooling and you get $2,500 a student.
And I think goes back to what Gordon was saying, that we have to account for the homeschool students, not only because they use the services from time to time, but at any moment in time, they can become students at the school. I mean, that's part of being a public school. So even with the voucher system, you're not eliminating the need for a certain facility and services.
That's right, yeah. And I don't know how that would be paid for, where that would come
They
from.
don't know either. I really don't know.
I think your locust analogy is apt. About once every 10 years, once every 7 years, you know, this issue comes up. And
I'm not going to be afraid then.
Don't be afraid.
Go on to-
well, we're still vigilant. Okay, we're over.
I think,
Go ahead.
you know, we have a lot of business to do today. I think we've addressed that adequately for the moment.
Department appointments, library update, Christopher. Come on down.
I don't have statistics with me today because they're incomplete. The provider, the service provider of our two most heavily used databases, ProQuest, which is subscribed to through the state library, it turns out that they somehow lost the entire statistics for the state for October.
Elephant ate their homework, is that how it works?
Yes, yes, that's sort of what happened. And not only that, but they appear to have lost statistics for the entire year, for the entire state of New Hampshire. So luckily, the person who's in charge of the state library had done a whole recap through the end of September, and everything that she had in that jived with our statistics so far. So we know we're good through the end of September, and hopefully ProQuest will be able to restore the data that they have lost. So we'll get October and the rest of the year with no problem. I can say that we did have 8 new patrons register in October. That brings the year-to-date total to 112, which is 56 adult residents, 23 kids, 8 non-residents, 24 seasonal adults, and 1 seasonal youth for 112. The Friends of the Library sponsored a book and author lunch on the 28th of October. It was a Halloween program. Roxy's Wicker came and talked about haunted graveyards in New Hampshire. She had some pretty chilling stories, and her book is at the library if anyone is interested in following up on that. Because we were closed on Saturday, our usual new and good as new book sale didn't happen. So we've rescheduled that to Saturday, December 2nd. That will go on in the Hamel Meeting Room. And there will be books, movies, toys and games, and perhaps a raffle basket or 2, all in aid of the building fund. The Polar Express and tree lighting and caroling is scheduled for Friday, December 8th. And on the 9th, Saturday, we will set up the usual craft tables for family Christmas crafts, and there will be a variety of crafts so that anyone of any age will be able to do at least a couple of things. As for building and grounds, Ronnie LeBranch told me that the ceiling tiles were on order as of October 31st. The boiler was cleaned on November 1st, and I'm expecting that the septic tank will be pumped sometime this week. We will be closed for Thanksgiving Day and the Friday afterwards. We will be open Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend. And last, but very far from least, Tufton Borough Free Library has been nominated for the 2018 National Medal for Museum and Library Service, which honors outstanding libraries and museums that contribute significantly to the well-being of their communities. The nominations just closed at the end of October. I'm not exactly sure when this is announced. There are usually a dozen or so winners, museums and libraries every year. And it's certainly an honor to be nominated.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice job. Anything for Christie?
Not for me.
So we're still doing a monthly pump out?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. That seems to be working pretty well. We turn off the water at night on the toilets. We've turned off the water in the sink in the public bathroom. We have waterless, alcohol-free hand sanitizer everywhere. We're asking staff to take their dishes home if they bring stuff for lunch, not to wash them there. And I'm trying to do crafts in story hour that don't involve hand washing afterwards. We're doing our best to conserve as much water as we can.
Great. Thanks.
Did you want to speak while we're doing library?
It'd be, I don't know. The people would like us to. Go ahead, that's fine, I'd like to.
Can we spend 5 minutes?
So you have us down on the agenda to talk about the library warrant, right?
Yes.
And this is what you want to do right now?
Okay, we'll do that under continued business, okay?
Okay,
Because I'm running a little late here.
okay.
Okay, they okay with the board? Sure. Jack Parsons? Hey, Jack.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jack.
93 building permits to date, 22 new homes. The Lake Street boat ramp is starting it today. Pellet boiler up at the townhouse has been serviced last week. And the storm door in my office got broken in the storm. I have a new one, I just have to put it on.
And the permit for the other boat ramp?
It went in, the wetlands permit, so it should be pretty close, I think.
I imagine this, Jeff will get to it when he finishes.
I wouldn't guarantee that, but we'll see.
Okay. I have nothing else for you.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, say that.
Say, Road Agent Jim Bean, come on down. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you? Well, for the last month or so, we put away some winter sand, got that put away, mixed up with salt. We've had a lot of storm cleanup damage that has taken most of our time up. And we've been cleaning out culvert ends and ditch lines, getting ready for spring. That's really about it for what we had, budget for so far.
Got the latest printout, you got $56,000, so is that what you have in your budget?
Well, yeah, that's what I figured out. Mine came out on the 2nd, November.
I got mine the 9th.
But yeah,
Okay.
so for that's about what I calculated.
A compliment, you had a substantial issue of a tree down that could have very easily pulled the pavement up at Lane Pond Road. I noticed that took an effort to not damage the pavement, so nice job.
Oh, thank you.
I have a picture of it, I didn't bring it with me. Now, is that okay to put under Lane Pond Road warrant article?
Well, that's what I'm hoping.
And there's some funds left there. Any plans on using some of those funds to work on that turnaround, or remove the rocks or whatever? What are your thoughts there?
Well, we did haul in some more gravel for that area just after the pavement.
Yep.
It seems, it just seemed like it was a little bit low and had some problems there. So we hauled in some gravel, but I still think we could use a little more gravel, and then a good road grading would be good to kind of finish up that fund.
My thought is to use up those funds because
I agree.
they're dedicated just to Lane Pond Road.
And so you could use it, so.
Save your budget here. Anything else from the board?
Are we doing budget today, or what are we doing?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Sure. Born ready.
The next two items are highway budget and culvert assessment. Where would you like to begin?
The budget sounds great.
Um, As you know, you and I have had some conversation about road preparation.
Yes.
For purposes of discussion, I make a motion that the $50,000 that currently is in the warrant article be returned to your budget. How does the board feel about that motion?
Well, for purposes of discussion, I'll second it.
Okay.
How is it reflected in the budget currently? It's in the paving portion
Yes.
of the budget. So was your motion would be to reduce the paving budget by the 56,000 or whatever it is you're talking?
50,000, yes.
50,000.
I made the following comment. The line that historically that has been identified as road preparation, I believe should be returned to the road agent's budget. This was argued about ad nauseum 2 years ago by a budget committee minority. It was done to artificially drop the road agent's budget. This is not a capital improvement project by definition. It also ties the hands of the road agent in a year like we've had here. It also artificially raises the capital capacity figure and it robs legitimate CIP projects of that amount of resources.
I'd be happy to respond to that.
Go ahead.
Back as far as I know, and I've been on CIP, I think 7 years, that road improvement item has always been a capital cost, regardless of where it was listed. Okay, so when it was part of the budget, it still was capital. It's capital because it has a useful life of more than 2 years, 2 years or more, and it's over $10,000. So if the idea is we will move it out of the paving and road improvement article back into the budget, it doesn't change the capital nature of the item. It doesn't change the effect on total capital project costs. It's at the time that it was moved and combined with paving, there was certainly discussion about the appropriateness of that, and my thought at this point is, given that it has been moved and it is for at least the past 2, maybe 3 years, has been included as part of the paving warrant article. If we move it back into the budget, it creates another disconnect in the continuity of what we look at in terms of history over time. It's easy to look at it and say, oh, gee, now we're spending less on paving. But the fact of the matter is that we are spending what we have spent. It's just, is it part of the paving article, or is it someplace else? So if the idea is that we will take it out of capital expense, it's still a capital cost, regardless of whether it's included as part of the operating budget. And so from the CIP perspective, right, still counts against capital capacity. To make the change again creates another potential confusion point for people looking at how we spend money. Every time you make a change in how you account for things, if you want to tell the story completely, you're footnoting it with, this is what happened here, this is what happened there, kind of thing. I'm not suggesting we actually add footnotes, but it's all it's all part of the information flow that you need to understand how we spend our money. So that's my thought about separating it out and rolling it back into the operating budget. And because of the fact that it becomes another additional change, I would recommend that we not do that.
I guess I have a couple of thoughts on this. One is that you mentioned $50,000 came out, but I'm looking at the historical figures and it looks as though from 14 to 15 it went down $28,000. So there's a $28,000 shift. That said, we're looking at the road agent's recommendation for 2018. I've got a $48,600 increase that he's looking for.
And to explain that, I guess, instead of trying to take out that kind of money from that, and then we are not actually putting any more money towards roads, which I think we should put a little bit more money towards paving. So I'd like to put a little bit more money into my budget in the different areas. And if I have a little left over, I can be doing some of these things as well and still be able to pave more, is what I'm hoping to do. When it comes
So
to
are you
summer
saying that
maintenance.
your $48,000 increases that you're looking for are married to this $50,000 reduction?
They're not necessarily, they're not, because we have a shortfall, it seems like in every area. Especially, we have no provision for any storms. There's no provision for a storm damage, which this year has been substantial. So, given that, I have increased it, but at the same time, if we don't have a storm and I can come out ahead, I could possibly do a little bit more work on the roadsides as far as prepping ahead of time and stuff like that. It won't necessarily show for this year, but for the following year in paving, if I have a little bit more money and I get time to do the next road as far as possibly changing culverts or doing the ditch lines and drainage, if we could get a little further ahead, that would be great, and that's my goal. That would give us more money for the actual paving to go down.
I'm kind of in the Marcusson school of thought that culverts, paving, those are long-term repairs that are not annualized. They're like a change of culvert is hopefully will last 10 years. So that's a different capital investment than tree removal or apron paving. These expenses that are in your general fund are annual operating expenses that reoccur every year. So I'd like to keep, personally, I'd like to keep that stuff separate. We have to increase the paving budget because we want to pave more or repair more, then let's increase the paving budget. But it doesn't appear as though the $48,000 increase or your request for $48,000 is related to that. It's a different increase.
Correct.
So I'm not sure you have votes, Chairman.
You and I
I
talked,
think continuity of accounting is important, unless there's a really good explanation for changing it. We had a good explanation on the legal line, and we changed it. So,
how many current lines this year did you go over on your budget?
4. I get his word.
Yeah, 4.
And we had a 10-year storm season, correct? You know, part of it is I do repairs, trees, culverts like this, different than I do, road paving, although it's all, raised by taxes. It gives you flexibility. And I just heard you say that if you have an easy storm year, you can mix and match and be flexible, just like all the departments are. We don't hamstring. The last 5 years, you've been hamstrung. We've gone over the road budget for 5 consecutive years.
Have we?
Yes.
On the gross highway budget, we've gone over the last 5 years?
Yes, correct.
Even
Am
though-
I right or am I wrong?
I believe you're right.
Like this. Yeah, I want this guy to be as successful as he can be. And That's why I'm making my motion. But if no one else wants to speak?
So you have $15,000 worth of over expenses currently in the highway budget.
Yes.
And we're looking for a $48,000 increase overall in the highway budget. I guess I'd have to have documentation for me to feel comfortable giving that kind of increase of how much we went over for the last 5 years or whatever it was.
I'd like to raise the point too, that we currently are doing the most smallest amount of work that we can do and still get away with it. Road grading hasn't happened yet this year as far as doing any of the dirt roads. A lot of things have just been put off. So if I did everything in a normal way that I do in the past, this budget would be a lot further. It would be way over right now. You know, I think we're 50,000 behind in total.
It's
That's what-
important to put together and move forward a budget that reasonably represents what we expect cost to be. It's, you know, as we look at your proposal, I mean, as I look at it, I would expect that if we moved it forward as it stands, that you would have no problem staying within that total budget next year.
I'm hoping we get caught up from this year as well. We're just substantially behind on work. I mean, the road mowing, road grading, all that's just way behind.
My point, Jim, and we've talked about this, the 50,000 were back in your budget, where it was taken out of by the budget committee.
Is it 50, Chairman? I'm sorry for interrupting, but I haven't seen the 50 yet. I'm seeing 28.
I'm talking about the road preparation fund of 50,000.
And you're probably right. I'm just looking at what the highway department's budget went to from 14 to 15, which is, I believe, when that change happened. And it dropped by $28,000. Gross budget.
The expense dropped by $28,000, but we're not, I don't know what the budget dropped by, okay? Because all we're looking at is what was expended, not what was approved. And I don't recall if there was an increase in the budget year to year to reduce that delta as well.
Right. But we overspent the budgets and we're still $28,000 down.
Mhm.
Well,
I mean,
thank you for listening.
If we looked at the trend up until that point when you say there were some rogue members of the budget committee, you're still in the 420s. And even accounting for inflation and increased expenses, to push it to 458,000 this year, I think is a stretch.
Okay.
I mean, I think if we were talking the 430,